I want people to know right now that this right here is not the same as Bernhard Goetz. What's up, guys? John Claymore here, and now that we've had an additional, I guess, 2 or 3 days to kind of process what's going on in New York City, I can now officially give you guys my full thoughts on this, seeing how the first video was kind of a, let's just say, an initial reaction. Now, guys, I am showing you some footage from over the weekend, some of the, how do I say this, the protests. Of course, people think it's going to turn into a bunch of riots. I personally don't think that that is going to be the case, as I will be explaining in this video yet again. But I'm also going to explain to you guys why this situation and Bernhard Goetz are not the exact same. So anybody out there who is saying stuff like it's another vigilante or whatnot, I don't think they have the full picture on this. But then again, though, speaking of Bernhard Goetz, there is one face from that whole Bernhard Goetz thing that has finally emerged. And of course, I'm pretty sure you're not surprised that Sharpton would suddenly come out.
Had mental health issues, but that it was certainly not something that should have sentenced him to death. And I think that many of us have taken that position in the civil rights community. I know National Action Network has, that you cannot let this go unaccounted for without really opening the door to legitimizing and giving a basis of vigilantism. This young man, unarmed, did nothing to anyone, didn't assault anyone, was disruptive, which happens every day in subways, and you're going to put him in a chokehold and hold him there for minutes at a time while 2 other people hold him down and kill him. This person should face a grand jury and the 2 people with him. And the attorneys say that the family's going to pursue this. They're planning a funeral. All of the community is riled up about it. And I think the protests are just saying this could be anybody. You can't take the law in your own hand, and you certainly can't kill someone when there's no life extenuating circumstance to even make.
Sharpton, by the way, was very, I would say this right here. There are a lot of controversies that Al Sharpton has been a part of that people oftentimes forget about. There's the Tawana Brawley incident, and of course, there's also Bernhard Goetz. But let me just, like I said before, let me go ahead and get this out of the way now. This is not the same situation. Now, before we go any further, you got a lot of people talking about the fact that Jordan Neely had what? A lot of arrests. There are a lot of tweets out there with a lot of videos of him attacking people. There's especially this one right here that you're about to see where he was defecating in a subway. There was another one that was released where Jordan Neely apparently threw a girl into a subway train while in the subway. And there's also been this whole issue of how it was that, what is it? Yeah, people standing in the subway, people getting thrown into the subway, which is extremely dangerous, especially if a train is coming. Obviously, somebody could get hurt. Somebody could go screw getting hurt. I would say getting killed. I have no idea in the world why I said hurt before killed. Maybe it's just the way the YouTube algorithm has been. You guys know me. I oftentimes do these videos off the cuff. And, of course, now you're seeing reports upon looking at it, and, hell, I even missed this right here. My bad. That it took more than one person, obviously, to restrain this individual. So, yeah, let's go ahead and revert back to the whole Tim Pool, Lance the Surfs debate.
People find it reasonable to subdue him, and the person dies. That person was in the process of committing a crime. If you lose your life in the process of committing a crime, I'm not going to blame the victims for this, right? Would you blame the victims for this?
When you're saying victims, you mean the people who killed him?
The people who are being attacked.
But were they attacked prior, or did they try to subdue him? Do we have footage before the event begins?
So in New York, for example, if you go up to someone and threaten them, you've committed a crime, right? You've committed a criminal act of violence against another person by threatening them and going up to their face, right?
And so you're saying at that point you have the ability to proportionally respond with violence.
Yeah, actually, there's a video of this. Myth Informed has it. 7 years ago, this man was called a hero for diffusing violence by putting another man in a chokehold. A man in the subway was getting up in people's faces, and he was threatening them, and another man got up behind him and put him in a chokehold, and he was put on national television, and he was celebrated as a hero for doing so. So this is what I'm talking about, anarcho-tyranny. I feel like you're latching onto this completely from a point of, you don't have knowledge on proper technique for subduing an individual, nor
none of us do,
nor the legal expertise.
None of us do as well.
But see that's kind of an absurd thing to just outright. Well, look, I'm going to say this guy committed a murder and should go to prison, but I'm not an expert and neither are you. Therefore, he should be convicted.
I never said that. I'm actually asking questions because these are things that I don't fully understand about. Is it legal for him to do what he did?
Yes,
that's why he wasn't charged. Proportionally legal.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why he wasn't charged. He was released. However, in this day and age, what's likely going to happen is a narco-tyranny. People go out in the streets, they protest, and the police say, for political reasons, we're going to go find this guy and we're going to arrest him. And
we'll be doing a separate video on that debate this week. I understand it's not trending, but a few things happened in that debate that just lets you know exactly how far down the rabbit hole and where we're at in America. Not to mention, I'll be talking a little bit more tomorrow on the Cleopatra side of things, because I want to kind of go back and look at that one more time. So expect that video to go along with this one here tomorrow. So here's the deal. In the city of New York, they kind of dropped the threshold for arrest down so low. And not only did they drop the threshold for arrest, but they also dropped the threshold to release somebody. Let me give you an example of how bad it is in New York. What Tim was saying there earlier about somebody actually stepping up and it actually looks like you may be getting threatened or somebody just says something. Think about it this way here. If I'm in New York City, based upon the actual threshold level for charges or being arrested, let's say I had a conversation with my best friend, I got pissed off, and I said, you know what, dude, I'm going to kick your ass. Depending on how he or she feels at that point in time, it's very, very possible if they're feeling some kind of way that they could, in fact, have me arrested and say he was threatening me, he made my life feel like I was in danger. Yeah, that type of stuff there. So right now at this moment in time, there are a lot of people out there thinking that Mr. Penny will more than likely just get off as a result of this. That's probably the reason why he was actually released shortly after questioning. Now, here's the deal. They're calling for a grand jury. They're calling for an indictment. They're calling for all that stuff there. They're calling for this guy to practically go down, which, of course, I'm going to kind of go ahead and explain the whole situation here as far as the choke was concerned, even though this came out that not only was it 3 people that were trying to restrain, not only was there people out there kind of saying, look, you know, they commended him for taking this guy down and restraining this guy because he was obviously getting a little bit violent. He was obviously getting a little bit, how do I say, a little bit noisy. He was running his mouth, all that type of stuff there. And, of course, as we've already established in this individual's past, Mr. Neely's, obviously something was wrong with this guy. And, obviously, he had been in trouble on multiple occasions, arrested a lot. Kind of sad, too, especially given the fact he was very, very talented Michael Jackson impersonator. There are videos of him doing his Michael Jackson impersonations all over Twitter. But let me go ahead and say this really quick. In New York City, what is the number one route of travel? The subway. Why is this important? Well, you see, people have got to take the subway to get to and from, as I mentioned in the previous video. Now, you can try walking around NYC, but based upon the amount of people that are already walking, based upon traffic, if you want to take a cab, you may find yourself in a position where you may not be able to move. I've been to New York City twice. I love going to New York City, but then again, at the same time, though, anytime you have situations like bad crime, you're obviously hesitant to going. I do plan on going back, but then again, though, at the same time, like I said, it depends on the conditions. Tourists are going through like crazy. People take the subway to get from point A to point B. So obviously the subway is a very big deal, which does make you, on the surface, think of Bernhard Goetz, because that did happen in the subway. And there are some similarities to how the situation could end up, but they are definitely not the same. In Bernhard Goetz's case, what was going on was that for a long time, people were mugging those on the subway. And of course, Bernhard Goetz got up, finally got upset with the whole thing, and he decided to fight back, shooting a few of these individuals. The city of New York, in the trial, they sided with him, saying, look, we got to go through this. We got to go through this all the time. We got to go through this every day, every minute, every day that we're on the subway. We run the fear of getting attacked. So Bernhard Goetz was heralded as a hero. Even though Bernhard Goetz has now came out and said that he thinks Mr. Penny should pay for this and should answer for this, which I think is a little bit hypocritical. But here's the deal. In Penny's case, what he was doing was he was protecting third parties. He was simply trying to restrain, and he was simply trying to, I don't know, subdue someone, like many people have actually said. Because let's just go ahead and break this down. Why would you throw a choke on somebody? And by the way, the choke that he threw was not a blood choke, because I just saw this on Stitch and Adam, and they got this from here completely wrong. Look, I'm prior service U.S. Marine, but I'm not an expert on martial arts or anything. I just know enough to get by, and I've been taught the exact same choke. This right here looks more the equivalent of an air choke or a figure 4 choke. All chokes are not exactly designed to kill somebody right off the bat. So you got people that are saying, well, he held him in there for 15 minutes. I hate to say this, man, but if he held on to somebody for 15 minutes like that, the individual would have been dead long before anybody showed up. And you can obviously see, of course, if you go in the post-millennial article, there's the actual video where Mr. Neely is actually moving and they're trying to help him up, which makes me kind of wonder, when did he actually die? Don't worry, more information will probably come out, and of course, it stands to always be ready to make a mea culpa video in case something like that occurs. Now, here's the deal. When you put a blood choke on, typically the time is about 13 seconds and an additional 4. It normally cuts off the blood from the carotid artery to the brain, and therefore they typically tend to die. The figure 4 choke is designed to hold a person down a little bit further and possibly get them to pass out. Normally what happens is an individual will pass out, and if the hold is held on much, much longer, they tend to die shortly after that, or they could die as a result of this. Mr. Penny, from what I'm seeing, was simply protecting third parties, and due to the fact that the city of New York or the state of New York has dropped the threshold so low on arrest, many people are thinking that Mr. Penny just may get off, or he may have even been in the right. Now, me personally, if I was in that situation, I might have actually hesitated to do anything about this, but obviously if a threat persists and a threat is in your face, potentially could cause problems, then yes, you're going to need to do something, whether it be a shoulder choke, whether it be taking someone down, possibly angling a triangle choke, which would be very, very hard to do while you're on top because you need to be on your back, an arm bar, which means that somebody could still get out of that hold, or maybe even possibly a figure 4 choke or an air choke like what Mr. Penny was using. Blood chokes typically tend to actually put someone down between that 13 to 17 second time frame. This right here looks more to me like what Mr. Penny was doing. And like I said, I'm not praising. I'm not saying he should have. It looks to me like what Mr. Penny was doing was he was trying to get a hold of Mr. Neely so that way Mr. Neely could not do anything else. By the way, as you guys saw, it took 3 separate people to help restrain this person. Also, to go on top of this, we have no idea what Mr. Neely was on, and of course his family has issued a statement, and of course this entire thing is getting much, much worse.
Familiar with the matter? The Manhattan District Attorney's Office plans to present the case to a grand jury as protests continue to intensify here in New York. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent George Solis. And George, you were out there at some of these demonstrations this weekend. You got to see the furor with some of the people who are protesting, demanding some accountability here. Tell us more about that and how soon we could see some action with this grand jury.
Yeah, Anna, good morning. So what we've seen is a number of protests starting to grow in intensity, as you mentioned. Friday, we saw about 50 people outside of the DA's office demanding justice, demanding accountability. That bled over into the weekend where we saw hundreds of demonstrators there at that subway station where Jordan Neely lost his life. And they walked all the way, we believe, to 63rd and Lexington. And then they staged right there at that subway station. And we saw a number of arrests there, about 13, according to the NYPD. So these protesters are demanding accountability. They say they can't understand why the man accused of murdering him, Daniel Penny, the 24-year-old Marine veteran, was questioned by authorities and then released. So we do know, as you mentioned, a grand jury is likely to be convened. There's still no exact timeline on that, whether or not charges will be presented in this case. Now, both sides have issued their statements. I do want to read the latest statement from the Neely family after the attorneys for that 24-year-old Marine veteran put out their release and saying he never intended harm. And they say Daniel Penny's press release is not an apology nor an expression of regret. It is a character assassination and a clear example of why he believed he was entitled to take Jordan's life. In short, his actions on the train and now his words show.
Or it could be cooling down, kind of like just turning into a regular protest, which, by the way, we're going to talk about riots here in a second, too, and if we're actually going to be expecting any of this stuff right here in the very near future, especially once we get towards the end of the video. But here's something else, too, that you need to consider, because speaking of that Timcast episode, it was Ian Crossland brought up the fact that he was saying you probably couldn't have punched him either. Okay, the subway is very small, very enclosed. It's moving. You've got people standing around. If you decide to punch someone, and of course, if you go on Twitter, you will see videos of people getting into fights on the subway where they get slapped or they get hit, and some of these people actually slap and beat up women for some odd reason, which is just a sign of these people not being raised right. But if you get into a fist fight on the subway, you run the risk of it spilling over and causing more harm to others around you. Next thing you know, I mean, ask the question. What normally happens when you get to a fist fight? Somebody throws a punch. Next thing you know, you're in a scuffle. You're on the ground. You're moving around. What if somebody's got a knife? What if somebody's actually, it's a little bit riskier to get in that type of situation. And also something else too, due to New York dropping the threshold on arrest, it's very possible that simple assault, which is exactly how this right here would be perceived if maybe he had used his fist, it's very possible that it would have been a lot worse as far as the actual coverage and punishment. Maybe Mr. Penny would have been arrested and locked up right away, or maybe it's possible that Mr. Neely, let's say if he threw the first punch, could have also been locked up as well. I know you're probably thinking to yourself, why not punch him? Maybe you can knock him out. The whole entire situation would have ended a lot faster. But that's not always what happens. You oftentimes cannot participate, cannot actually properly anticipate what is going to happen in a fight, especially if you do not know the individual that you are tussling. Leads me to my conclusion on what I think is going to happen. Guys, you see these protests and all this stuff, and you're probably thinking to yourself, riots could break out. Now, let me go ahead and say this right quick about riots. You've got people out there who say that riots are an emotional response. It's a form of rage. And then you've got other people out there who say that it is opportunism. A lot of these people who are protesting, and I think I saw a trans flag in one of these protests, makes me think that these people are just taking advantage of the situation to get their own individual protest out there. This is identity politics at its worst, or the result of identity politics. As I've said before, guys, the Democratic Party, and we'll be talking more about this in tomorrow's video, or the second video tomorrow about what's going on in Chicago. The Democratic Party, they have to do this. They have to hit this coalition of single-issue voters to link them together. However, if those single-issue voters do not get along, then what's going to probably happen is this right here. You're probably going to have a lot more fights, tussles, and crime is probably going to go through the roof. It's basically the society that you would have had during the time of Death Wish, or maybe even A Clockwork Orange. I have to reference the Empire of the Mind video series on A Clockwork Orange because this is practically liberalism gone mad. We've not fully gotten to that stage yet, but it's about to metastasize towards that. Now, on riots, and I know I touched on it for a second, I believe it's both. I think what happens is that one party gets upset and they start some shit while another party comes in and then uses the opportunity to do what? Rob, pillage, steal, all that crap there. And of course, you've got those people out there who feel like, hey, look, maybe I need to let off some steam because society does not like the fact that I'm trans or whatever. When you have so many people coming out the closet as trans, making you think that there's a trans genocide going on when so many people are coming out, which makes you think that trans genocide does not exist. I know I didn't say it the way the algorithm might want me to say it, but at this point in time, I really and truly don't care. So you ask me what I think is probably going to happen. This is what I think is going to happen. It's going to continue to be a protest like this. They're probably going to demand blood. They're probably going to scream and holler for this. This is probably going to be more of a slow burn. And depending on the outcome, which, by the way, I personally think that they're arresting Mr. Penny here, or now calling for his arrest, mostly due to political reasons rather than anything according to the law. I think somehow or another Mr. Penny, because the fact of the matter is that in New York on the subway they don't play. I have a feeling that Mr. Penny could very, very well beat this, and you may get a situation similar to, but not the same as what Bernhard Goetz had with protests and all that stuff there. That's actually what I think could more than likely occur, and I think this situation is probably going to go on a lot longer than people expect. Now, another reason why it is I don't think riots are probably going to happen, or full-scale riots, is because you don't have a Republican president in office. You don't have somebody to actually make look bad for the time being. So what are you going to do? You're probably going to put law enforcement on the ground so that way it doesn't look bad for the incumbent. Yes, this entire thing boils down to politics. Guys, John Claymore. If you like this content, please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, sign up in the comment section. I'll see you guys later.